Hey everyone, this is Tim. On this week's show, Kumar and Jordan are both obsessed with Frank Herbert's Dune and are struggling to cope with a delayed release date for the new Dune film there in Australia. So as they wait it out, they'll review Marvel's 1984 comics adaptation of the David Lynch Dune film, written by Ralph Macchio with art by Bill Sienkiewicz, a comic that in some ways may be better than the film it adapts. They also discuss the comics adaptation of the 1992 film Bram Stoker's Dracula, a comic published by Topps and written by Roy Thomas with art by Mike Mignola. Was this comic a necessary step for Mignola between Batman and Hellboy? First, if you appreciate the work we do on this podcast, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics.
We ready to go?
Yeah, so you want to go?
This is Kumar.
This is Jordan.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. I said it right the second time.
Congrats. We're back. We're back in person.
Well, okay, we're back in person.
Yep.
We're ostensibly here to talk about the 1984 Marvel Comics adaptation of David Lynch's Dune movie and the 1992 adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, published by Topps initially. I have a suspicion we might not even get to that.
Really?
Well, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, we thought, we were tossing up doing just one, discussing just the Dune one, and I didn't think we'd be able to fill time, so perhaps a mini episode, because this is a way for Kumar and I to work out our frustrations.
Well, okay, no, so this is, yeah, so we're not even, I say ostensibly because we're really here to talk about our codependency. And your enabling of my Dune obsession. Now, because this is a comics podcast, it doesn't come up, and anybody who listens, the 50 people listen to the show probably don't know, but I am obsessed with Dune, have been since I was about 15. And fine, but then this new movie gets announced about 3 years ago. Okay, start to get excited. Then it's supposed to come out at the end of 2019 or so, initial release. And then they're like, then COVID happens, they delay it for a year. And then, okay, it's delayed for years.
Over the medium in which it was going to be released?
Right, yes. There was talk about it going only to HBO Max and not being released in cinemas at one stage. And, okay, but when we had that extra year, initially I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go see it. But then it's like, okay, now I'm going to reread the book, the first book, which is, okay, well, let's go back in time. Another thing is, I don't even know if this episode is going to be published, because I don't know if we're going to talk about comics much at all. But I have to get this stuff out.
Okay.
And really, this should be an intervention, but we're just going to sit here and mainline, I think, is what's going to happen for an hour. And I'm also drinking a beer during a recording. I don't think this has happened. I've done it once before, and I don't remember what episode it was.
It was for Constantine.
It was. So it was like I was drinking in that episode too?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Or it might have been Cross Plus 100.
And when's the last time I drank a beer in the afternoon? It must have been that same time.
Yeah. I'm an enabler. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, okay. So my older brother, 6.5 years older than me, read Dune when he was 12, and he became obsessed with it. And I knew that, but at that time I was like 6 or whatever. 1984, the movie comes out. So he's at this stage. So I'm 10. He would have been like 16. Him and one of my parents go out to see it, come back. He's very disappointed with this movie. But he is obsessed with Dune, as I am. This Marvel comic, I have 3 different editions of it. of a movie I don't even like.
The 3 different editions.
The 3 different editions, 3 formats of it. I don't even like it. I don't like that movie, but I bought this thing in 3. This is the problem I'm having. My whole life. It's not, and anyway, so my brother comes. He's because he's obsessed. He bought like the board game, the Parker Brothers board game. Mm-hmm. We played that all the time, and that was my first exposure to Dune. About age 10, I learned all the names of the characters and these weird objects and things, and that kind of was an initiation into it that allowed me, when I was 15, to finally read the book and go, "Holy moly, this is the best thing." And in the past year, or past 2 years, I reread the book, and then it's like, okay, that took a month. Now I got 11 months to go. Okay, I started reading the other books. Then I started reading all these books. I've read The Philosophy of Dune and these 2 different books about Frank Herbert. I literally read the Cliff Notes of Dune. You think I'm joking? I am not. Last week I read the Cliff Notes of Dune. Anything I could get my hands on, I was reading all of it, and it's been building up. And then the worst thing that happened was we had another outbreak about 3-4 months ago, and they were like, "Look, it's supposed to come out worldwide in cinemas October 22nd." Not for Australia.
Nope.
Australia got a delay until December. So, as we're recording this, much of the world, at least $330 million worth of ticket sales of the world, has seen Dune. We have not.
No.
And we're not going to see it for another 3-4 weeks. It's still...
We have our tickets.
We have our tickets. We have our tickets 4 weeks in advance. We have our tickets. But it's not out. So we're kind of stuck. Every time we meet, every time you and I meet, we're like, let's try to not talk about, for the sake of our wives, let's try to not talk about Dune. And it's almost like you can sit by a watch. It's like 5-10 minutes later, no, we got to talk about, because every time we see a single still from the movie, a new trailer, one frame from this Chinese trailer has come out, and there's one frame, this shot of this one thing. What's this thing? Or is this scene? Is this that scene? Do you think they've cut this scene? Now it's even worse, because people are seeing it, they're putting comments online, they're like, this is in it, this isn't in it, and every single time, then we meet, and every frame we have to have a 10-minute discussion about, and so 10 minutes into these, couples dinners, the wives are going crazy. And this has been going on for a year, and it's building, it's getting worse and worse, and it's even worse now that
it's not getting better, it's building to a head.
Right, and then what happened was, you were like, I wish we could do the Inkle, because we've been talking about the Jodorowsky version.
Yeah. Well, you didn't mention one of the ways in which we slaked our Dune obsession over the past few months is that we set about re-watching all the visual representations of Dune that are currently extant. So first of all, we watched the Spice Diver edit of the 1984 Lynch film. We watched that over 2 weeks. We watched it over Zoom.
Yeah, that's now on YouTube in 4K, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, because we were in lockdown, we watched it over Zoom on Sunday night. Then we watched the Dune miniseries, the 2000 sci-fi miniseries. Yep. And then we watched the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune about Alejandro Jodorowsky's ill-fated attempt to make a Dune feature film, which would have been bananas. If you haven't seen this documentary, everyone, you should totally watch it. It's amazing. And so here we are, the intensity of this Dune obsession is building to a fever pitch. And I said, yes, after watching Jodorowsky's Dune, I said, I wish we could do the Inkle.
But we've already done it. Yeah. It's been done on the show pretty recently by me and Tim. I'm going to say within the last, since lockdown, since coronavirus at least, because I borrowed Emmett's copy of the Inkle to talk about it, and I haven't been able to return it to him.
Because of lockdown. Gotcha.
So it's been done fairly recently, and because the Inkle was a project which we discussed on that episode that came out of Jodorowsky's attempt to make Dune. And then you said, why can't we talk about the Marvel adaptation. Again, this is your enabling. You're like,
well, you shared a couple of weeks ago or months ago, I don't know, I'm losing track of time when it comes to Dune, but you shared a link on Facebook about, that was a discussion of this particular comic.
This is only a few weeks ago, yeah. So I think it's pretty much as soon as the movie came out. Because my feeling was, you suggested this last week, or maybe even once before, let's talk about the Marvel adaptation of the Lynch movie, and my gut feeling was there's not really that much to say about it. But there was recently on the Comics Journal website, of all places, I'm like, whoa, this is a strange place for this to be showing up. There was a oral history with Ralph Macchio, who wrote it, and Bill Sienkiewicz, and I think the editor, who I can't remember now, but as soon as I open up one of these copies, we'll figure it out. Going through how it came about and the creative process behind it, and there was actually quite a lot of interesting stuff in there.
That there was.
And straight out of the gate, I mean, this is the comic's better than the movie.
Yeah, we're just going to lead with that. Yeah.
By far.
Yeah.
And it's so, I mean, I'm happy for people to know about it, and to, even if you took Dune out of it, it's really kind of, I was looking at the dates. I think I'm not sure when in '84 this came out exactly.
I love that. That's fantastic. Oh, you can't see this, everybody.
No, we're looking at the opening. Yeah, the opening page is a kind of abstract representation of a desert done by Sienkiewicz early on. I think he talks specifically about this page in the oral history, but it's a really amazing image that he's almost abstract image that he's come up with to represent this desert and the sky and everything. And
he states that this is a Dune we're looking at.
Right.
So, those of you who are listening, perhaps you could Google Comics Journal and oral history of the 1984 Marvel Dune adaptation, and then you can probably see this image, and it looks fantastic.
Yeah. So Sienkiewicz started on New Mutants around 1984, I think. So I'm thinking it must have happened after this. I don't imagine he would have had time to work on Dune after he had started on New Mutants. So I think this must have come first. But this is really when Sienkiewicz became Sienkiewicz. And he says that himself in that oral history. I don't think he was ever this experimental with anything prior. So just in terms of art, and this is, another friend had made a comment online, I think 7 years ago. I went through my Facebook. I knew we'd had a conversation about this in the Facebook group at some stage. But somebody had noted that you couldn't even do this in animation because it's all about the brush strokes and everything, and it's that the thickness of the line is always really unpredictable, and all that kind of starts at this stage. And I remember the first time I saw New Mutant stuff in the late 80s or mid 80s, and I didn't understand what the hell I was looking at or how this person was allowed to draw comics. But this is the beginnings of the Sienkiewicz that would go on to do Stray Toasters and Electra Assassin, and of course Alan Moore's Big Numbers. And do we have a bell to ring when we mention Alan Moore?
Yeah, but, that's it. Look, these days it's how long is it till we talk about Dune, or how long is it till we talk about Alan Moore?
Yeah, I think straight right out of the gate, that's the first thing that hits you.
The art, yeah. It's really something.
And especially when he gets to do really abstract stuff, like when Paul takes the Water of Life. None of this stuff is really going to make any sense. He's able to do these really...
Well, he's got with the narrative boxes, we're able to explain what we're seeing. Not
yes.
It's here. I mean, this one of the. It's like you said. This is a superior adaptation. Now, when we're talking about adaptations, Kumar and I have some theories about adaptations, and the thrust of Kumar's thesis is that a great adaptation is adapted from an inferior work.
Yeah, there need to be gaps. So I feel,
and this comic is strong where the film is weak.
Yeah, and it's the example I always think of with that is The Godfather, and we're going to talk about Coppola later, maybe.
Oh, yes.
And we're going to talk about Mignola. Also came into his own on that Dracula comic, and we're going to get to that, I think.
But think of the things that are lame about the film. The reams of expository dialogue. Right. The lame sandworm effects. Some of the special effects are terrible. The dream sequences are opaque and nonsensical.
Yeah.
Think of everything that's turgid and lame about the feature film. It's transformed in this comic.
Yes. Okay. So what I was going to say about Godfather was Coppola apparently could only read 70 pages of the book, and he thought it was so bad he couldn't finish it. But he wrote that movie with Mario Puzo. I don't know if they talked about the fact that he couldn't finish Puzo's book, but
perhaps he didn't mention it.
But yeah. So anyway, so that's the example I always think of. But so straight out of the gate, the thing that you always think of with Dune is the voiceovers. With David Lynch's movie of Dune. Now, the novel has
the
all
internal monologues.
It has all the internal monologues, which are done in italics, which I think George R. Martin lifted directly. That's my gut feeling. I don't remember. I don't know of anybody else that really goes with he thinks or he thought and the previous passages in italics. But anyway, so every character has these internal monologues, and it was Lynch and the screenwriter's only solution. How are we going to get all this information out there? People are thinking these things in the book. We have to have these voiceovers. Now, these days, rule number one in screenwriting is don't use voiceovers. Yeah. I actually think it's a masculine rule, because if you watch any movie that has been a hit with women or TV show, Sex and the City, we're watching the show called Physical at the moment.
Right.
It's a non-stop voiceover, and it's voiceover that isn't giving you any information. Meanwhile, Justine was having problems of her own. Like, you don't need that information, but it's really, I think it's a very male screenwriting rule that they say you can't have this texture in there.
Well, it certainly sucks in the Dune film.
Okay, so in Dune, it really stinks, and the thing is, as we talked about after we watched it, I realized watching it that once he did it once in the first 5 minutes, it's like Chekhov's gun. He couldn't just use it once, because then it would stick out really like a bad thumb. And there were so many scenes in there where people were thinking things they could have just said out loud,
absolutely,
or didn't need to say, or
any number of things.
You get into the comic book,
but as you said, you have to commit to it once you've started doing it.
You have to commit to it. You get into a comic book, thought balloons.
Thought balloons are fine.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
What a revelation! Yeah. How great are comic books? You can just have thought balloons. You can have
narrative boxes.
Narrative boxes. Another amazing, amazing thing. When the movie came out initially in 1984, ushers were handing out glossaries on paper to the audiences.
Yes.
Because there's so much
weird summaries and glossaries.
Terminology, and every single person, including Kyle MacLachlan, who supposedly read the book every year from the time he was 15 years old, every summer. I saw him on a talk show in the last 10 years saying the first 100 pages are unintelligible. Jodorowsky says the first 100 pages are unintelligible. I think Rebecca Ferguson, who's playing Jessica in the new version, I think has not read the book. She couldn't get through it.
Oh my goodness.
Here, I love this. There's literally a page, I actually flipped to it by accident, where someone mentions the Landsraad, which is the Council of Houses, or the Legislature of Houses.
Yeah.
And they literally put one of those comic book footnotes in the panel with the asterisk.
Yes.
This is so great. It's so real. It just feels like it was a comic to begin with. Everything about it feels like this was never a movie, or I mean, the way they've handled the voiceovers and the way they've handled the abstractness of the art and everything just feels like this is a straight up comic book.
Yeah, so some of the things and some of the good things about the film are elevated in the transition to the comic book as well. Like some of the things like the costumes, some of the aesthetic comes across.
Yeah.
One thing, if I have a critique, I would say we'd lose out on some of the great sets, especially in the early half of the film. A lot of what's happening in this comic, it's in close up a lot. People in profile.
Yeah, and I think...
And it feels cramped.
I wonder how much access they had to the film, because this is something we'll talk about when we get to
the oral history said that they had stills, because the film wasn't out, they had stills, and they had a script that was constantly being updated.
Right. So we got to talk about some of that too, but... Because when we get to the Mignola one, Mignola did some of the design work on that movie.
Did he?
He designed the castle and maybe a few other bits. I can't remember.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
So I think he had pretty good access to what was going on.
Right.
And you can tell in that he was really drawing from, I think, more than stills. It's hard to tell because well, when we get to that,
We will get to that. Well, let's come back.
But the thing is, there were trading cards for Dracula, and I noticed a lot of the images were the same ones that were on the trading cards. We'll talk about why I know what all the trading cards look like later, but a lot of those images look the same. So they would have been making those stills for simultaneous release with the movie, so they might have had that. I don't know, but there's some interesting changes in here. So he's stylized the Baron a lot more.
Yes.
In a really great way.
Yes.
He's probably the likenesses are really great. They really look like the actors.
Yes. The Baron looks fantastic.
And the Baron does not...
There's a line in the article, the Comics Journal article, where they said to him, "We need you to put less pustules on the Baron's face," and he said, "Okay, if I can add 300 pounds to him."
Right.
And he's like Kingpin, or from the Daredevil comic. Like he looks like an enormous mountain of a person. And he flies, of course, and looms over people. The Baron looks fantastic.
Yeah, he looks really great in this comic, and also was less gross. So, because of maybe it was the pustules, but I remember when we were watching that movie together, I was dreading this scene where we finally see the Baron, because that scene always grosses me out.
I love that scene. That's one of my favorite scenes.
It is crazy. I can understand how you could love it, but when they're like injecting stuff into the pustules or sucking stuff out,
It could be one or the other.
they seem to be maintaining his diseases on purpose.
It's wondrous.
It's really funny because there's a line where the Reverend Mother... Is any of this making any sense to anyone? There's a line where the Reverend Mother says that Paul could have been wed to a Harkonnen.
Yes.
And the bloodlines could have sealed the breach.
Yes.
Can you imagine him marrying anyone from this family? It's really hard to picture what's going on in Harkonnen land.
Well, he was the female. If Jessica had done what the sisterhood required of her, Paul would have been born female and would have been wed to Fade, who would have, and then they would have been the parents of the Kwisatz Haderach. But I love that scene, and I like it. I think it was something you said as we were watching it, because they represent human decadence taken to an unutterable extreme.
Yes.
So this Dune is set 10,000 years in our future. Human beings have behaviourally continued to evolve, and the Harkonnens represent the peaks, or rather the depths of extreme hedonism and grossness. And and everything about that scene is fantastic. I love it. I'm a defender of the Lynch film. I don't hate it. There are parts of it that I really like and enjoy.
There are parts of it, and the cast is phenomenal.
Yeah.
There's hardly a movie with a better...
Compared to the cast of Dracula, I mean, we keep talking about Dracula.
Well,
we're going to have to get to Dracula.
Yeah,
the cast in Dracula, with the exception of Gary Oldman and Anthony Hopkins, is bloody terrible.
No, I'm gonna argue against that when we get to it.
When we get to it.
If we get to it.
This will have to be a double episode. Well, this was going to be a short episode, a mini episode, Kumar. Now it's probably going to be a double episode.
It was just going to be a chance for me to get some of this stuff off my chest. I mean, I even was thinking... There was a story I didn't tell. Now I'm going to tell it. I was even going to talk about how we were one of the first people to adopt VHS around town.
Okay.
My parents, I think they paid $800 for a VCR pretty early on. And then they got a second one, so they would copy everything. And kids used to come by and say our house was better than the video store, because every tape had 3 copies, and we had just shelves of tapes. And... yeah, so because of that, we had the Dune came home on video very early. So it wasn't just the board game. My brother, even though he didn't like the movie, he came home with that, with the video almost as soon as it came out. So it would have been like a few months later, I guess. So I did see the movie pretty early on, and I have seen it many times despite not liking it. Yes, the cast. Brad Dourif, I'm just going through the list. Jose Ferrer, Linda Hunt, Kyle MacLachlan, of course, in his first movie. Virginia Madsen, first time I saw her in anything. Dean Stockwell, who passed away 2 or 3 days ago. First time I ever saw him in anything. Everett McGill is still a guy I absolutely love to this day.
Who's the face? The Reverend Mother Helen?
Yes.
Sian Phillips, is it?
Yes.
Amazing Welsh actress.
Yep.
Fantastic as the Augusta in I, Claudius.
Yep. Jürgen Prochnow.
Jürgen Prochnow from Das Boot.
Das Boot. I think, was it Das Boot earlier?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I haven't seen that, but I know him from that. And Mouth of Madness, Where's the bell? Because I have to say H.P. Lovecraft.
H.P. Lovecraft, ding. And then, what's his name? Who plays Lietkynes? Famous Swedish actor.
Oh yeah, Max von Sydow. Passed away a year or two ago.
So he did.
Amazing. Seventh Seal, like going way back. This guy's all these legendary actors. Sean Young.
Yeah, Sean Young. She had some great roles before whatever happened to her.
Who we haven't mentioned.
Sting. On all the posters, Sting as Feyd-Rautha.
Yeah, and Paul Smith as Raban is kind of a no-name, but for some, again, because the universe is aligning around me as this movie's about to come out, for some reason, Paul Smith, who plays Raban, who I've never seen in anything else in my life, in the past 6 months I've seen in 2 other movies. One was Popeye, where he plays Bluto, from 1980, Robert Altman movie.
Right, yes.
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
And the other one I saw was this 1982 Spanish slasher movie called Pieces, which is crazy. He's in that.
Oh my goodness.
And he squints with one eye. Out of
just
one
like
eye
he does
in every movie. He says as Bluto. He's always squinting out of one eye and looking really, peeved or something.
Incredible.
Yeah, I think that was it was my second time seeing Brad Dourif, because I had seen Cuckoo's Nest as a child. I don't know why my father let me watch Cuckoo's Nest as a child. It was his favorite movie at the time.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I want to like the movie, and for a long time, it was our visual Dune. And,
yes.
I mean, despite everything I'm saying about how much I disliked it, whatever, because of the game and the video, when I read Dune for the first time at age 15, those were the faces I put on those characters. And it helps you understand what's going on the first time you read it.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
I suppose I can talk a little bit about my own early exposures to Dune.
Yeah.
If I were in any company aside from Kumar's, I would describe myself as a Dune obsessive. As it happens, I can't do so. Unless there's a stronger word than obsession. Mania might be appropriate.
Yeah.
But I think my first exposure to Dune was the Dune 2 computer game, which was an early real-time strategy game.
Yep. Maybe the earliest. Maybe.
It was one of the genre-defining games that defined the whole genre of RTS. It's a lot of fun. I certainly had a lot of fun playing it, and then I believe I would have seen the movie. I think next.
Okay.
What
year was Dune 2?
Oh, let me think.
Or what year were you
What year did it come out? I'm not sure. I would have been playing it in the early 90s, I'd say. Yes. And then I would have seen Lynch, and I read the book around about the same time as you did when I was about 14 or 15. And that's my story. I like Dune a lot. As I said, can't describe myself. I'm obsessed. Sitting as I am. I'm sitting... lockdown's over here in Melbourne, so I'm back in the Sanctum Sanctorum, Kumar's office. So, this is a little bit like stepping into Kumar's mind. I'm surrounded by hundreds of comic books, figurines,
board games,
and a cornucopia of Dune material.
Yeah.
Everywhere I look, I can see the word Dune.
Yeah, there's 3 whole shelves dedicated to Dune over there.
Yeah. We got a sandworm.
Yep.
This is Stilgar.
Yeah, action figures, yeah.
Yes. So in normal circumstances, I'd be proud to call myself a Dune tragic and obsessive. Here, I'm not even approaching the level which I find myself in the company of.
Okay, what else do we want to...
Well, anything else we could say about the comic?
There's a lot I can say about it. So I didn't take many notes, but... so another thing related to the characters of the thought balloons is... and this is kind of relates to my feelings about the version that's about to come out here. Is the dialogue. Now, Dune is set 10,000, maybe 20,000 years in the future. They say 10,000, but that's after Guild, so it means after the Space Guild has been formed. So it might be 20,000 years in the future. Yeah. But we have feudal houses, we have sword fighting. What was the other thing we were talking about before we started recording?
No computers.
No computers. So there are in-story reasons for all of these things, but my feeling is those are the things that make Dune kind of timeless, is because it isn't based around some technology that was supposed to exist in the year 2005, which we don't have, or something like that. It's really, he's gone back to very archaic forms where there's dukes and barons and all this kind of stuff, and part of that is the dialogue. Sometimes he's even writing, Frank Herbert wrote in iambic pentameter, which is the craziest thing to think, especially the Baron speeches are sometimes in iambic pentameter. And the 2000 miniseries tried to,
hang a lampshade on it by having the Baron, whenever he ends a scene, he'll give a rhyming couplet.
And look in the camera.
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's right.
it's a bizarre thing, but the thing I like about that miniseries was they tried to find solutions to all of these things. I don't know if they were the right solutions. Sometimes they were boring solutions, whatever, but they did try to put as much as they could on screen. Watching the Lynch version, I feel like none of the actors know what they're saying. I feel like they're kind of delivering the lines, and some of Frank Herbert's words have come directly from the page to the screen in the dialogue, and I feel like the actors just have no idea, and the audience has no idea. Many people talk about how this is such an incomprehensible movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very long prologue. There's 4 prologues in the movie, actually.
Depending on
which version you
see.
3 or 4 prologues to get through. And there's one delivered by Virginia Madsen as Princess Irulan, maybe recorded after they finished the movie, who knows, where she just goes on this long rambling speech and like, what is all this stuff? You can't put it all together. Comics, perfect. So
yeah,
it doesn't. The characters know what they're saying. There's no sense that the actors are having trouble matching their faces to words are coming out of their mouths. You can read it 10 times to try to make sense of it.
Yeah, you can go back, and it's not like when you're in the film and something rushes by, a term is mentioned.
Yeah.
A scenario is described, and then it's gone, and you're already onto the next incomprehensible thing. With the comic, you can flip back a page.
There's another moment that's really perfect, and another thing that made me really feel like this was a comic before anything else was there's the scene where the Baron captures Jessica and Paul. He's got her tied up, and he explains his whole plan like a comic book villain.
Yeah.
He explains it all.
As he dominates the page. That's a great... He fills the page.
He fills the page, and he just gives this long speech, like Dr. Doom or anyone else, about what he did and all the machinations he went through and all this stuff. And it's so comic booky.
It fits perfectly with a comic book. Whereas when characters do that in films, of course, it looks weird.
It's very hackneyed and ham-fisted and very bizarre and weird to look at, weird to hear. You know, so in the case of Dune, you don't even know if the actors understand what they're saying.
You're right. This story fits a comic book far better than it fits a film. You don't feel... It feels consistent with what you've read in the medium before. Yeah. I think we don't see thought balloons a lot in comic books these days, but certainly when they were in the 80s, they were
because of Alan Moore, because of Watchmen. In Watchmen, they established certain rules.
Okay. No
thought balloons, no sound effects.
Okay.
So if you read Watchmen, you'll notice they had to work around these things. So that's kind of the legacy of that is that lots of comic books started stop doing them.
Okay.
Wholesale. And I remember when I was trying to write comics, 10 years ago, I would go into forums and people were saying, heroes act, they don't think. And all these stupid aphorisms about how word balloons are so awful or whatever. And
thought balloons? Well, I mean, quite often they think the narrative boxes just take the place of the thought balloons.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
Anyway, this comic has both thought balloons and narrative boxes, and it uses them both effectively, including dialogue or monologues.
Okay, so one thing we should talk about is things that were cut. Now, you would think, okay, certain scenes were cut or added to the movie. There are certain bits in here, in this comic, that are not in the movie. Mm-hmm. But it's a bit hard for me to remember because the last 2 times I've watched the Spice Diver cut, which is a fan edit. This fan has put stuff in, actually taken stuff out, and rearranged scenes and made a version of Dune that makes sense, like narrative sense.
He's restored some cut material, he's excised some material and reordered the film, organised it into books, much like the novel itself is organised into books.
And
book
actually...
1, book 2, book 3.
Yeah.
And I think he might even have recorded some new dialogue for the Navigator.
Right. So there's this comic also, there's 3 versions, but one version is a 3-issue series. And so I thought, oh, that's kind of perfect, because the original novel is in 3 parts. Of course, it doesn't break down the way the novel was, because in Lynch's movie, the entire 2-year period of the battle for Arrakis and the love story is all in one montage.
Yeah.
And actually, they've done really well with that, because they've taken the love story out of this montage in this comic, and they've just done it as the fight for Arrakis. The love story is 2 panels in the previous issue or whatever. That's all fine. But anyway, there were a few bits that I was like, oh, that wasn't in the Lynch cut, I think. But again, I don't remember how that theatrical cut looks, because there's also the so-called Alan Smithy cut, which was done by the studio.
Right.
But I noticed one thing they cut out of here. Oh, actually, there's another one. Well, okay, the first one goes back to the art, and did they have stills or what were they working from? The Gom Jabbar scene, where he's tested with this pain, where Paul is tested with this pain box. So
Yes.
he has to put his hand in the box. He's ordered to by the Reverend Mother. She puts this poison needle at his neck. The needle is called the Gom Jabbar. And she says, don't take your hand in the box or I'll prick your neck and you'll die, basically. The way Sienkiewicz has depicted it, he's got a shot, a close-up of the hand in the box, and she's saying, I hold at your neck the Gom Jabbar. And I'm like,
We don't even see it.
you don't see it. That's a very weird thing. That's a very weird way to stage that. Why would you have a close-up of the needle on his neck? And then the next page, you see her holding the Gom Jabbar. It's not at his neck. So that was a really awkward bit that made me think, okay, they don't have all the footage or something like that. They're just from stills. I noticed the Hunter Seeker scene was cut.
Completely cut, yeah.
Which is a crucial,
I found that odd, actually, now that you mention it.
this is, so, every scene,
And
as far
Mapes.
as I'm concerned, me in this room, every scene, oh yeah, Mapes is cut too.
Yeah, Mapes is cut.
Every scene is crucial. There's not a single word. In my opinion, the best screen adaptation of Dune would be the text of the novel projected onto a screen for 12 hours, just
Yeah.
scrolling up.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any other way to do it, really. But anyway, for me, every little thing is, and that's part of what we've been going through the past years, every trailer, every still, I'm like, oh, they're going to put this scene
Yeah.
in. They're not going to put this
You've
scene
been
in.
torturing yourself, and me.
I have been, yes, I admit to that. That is on me. And this is a thing that when we were talking about the dialogue earlier, from what I saw the trailer, none of Frank Herbert's dialogue is in that movie, in the new movie. And I think, for me, and I've said this 100 times and you're probably sick of hearing it, but for me, maybe the thing I love most about Dune is the novel, is the cadence of the prose. I think it's the most beautifully written novel. I can think of very few other books that really hypnotize me in that way and make me feel like I'm in that world. So, if you're the screenwriter of this and you adapt it, and of course you can't include any of the descriptions he has of the mountains or the ranges or dunes or sand or any of those things, what you've got is his dialogue. Why wouldn't you put that? And for me, part of it is that's part of the tapestry of that arch dialogue, is part of what makes it feel like it's 1500, not the year 10,000. So anyway,
Well, here's where you come across the problem with, that's fine for a novel.
yes.
And can you excise the dialogue from the, as you say, the beautiful poetic descriptions of the setting, of the people, all of that prose that you love? The dialogue is only part of it. And
Yes.
perhaps if you lift the dialogue and place it...
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And this might be... We were talking before about what makes a successful adaptation. And I think when it comes to adapting things, especially adapting them as movies, you have a tension between two things. On the one hand, you want the adaptation to do something original, something new and exciting. But on the other horn of the dilemma is that, and this is especially true if you're a fan, as we've just heard, that you want a faithful adaptation.
Yes.
And these two poles exist in tension because they're kind of mutually exclusive. You want something, there has to be something different because you're adapting it for another medium. But on the other hand, and especially when you're a fan, you are looking for consistency with the source material that you love.
Have you seen, speaking of 1984, have you seen 1984 that came out in 1984 starring John Hurt?
I haven't, actually.
That is super, super close to the book.
Right.
I think there's one scene, maybe they added like one dream shot that maybe is interspersed in the movie. that was not in the book. And that is an awesome adaptation.
Look, Kumar, I hate to rein you in like this, but we're already talking about 2 movies.
Yes.
And
Okay. All right.
I think here's an effective segue into Dracula. Okay, so perhaps we can stop talking about Dune now and start talking about Dracula.
Wait a second. Okay, so sorry, you do your seg. I'll
Thanks,
say
man.
10 more things, and then we'll go into.
No worries.
Coming up, the guys struggle to let go of Dune, but do finally get to a good discussion of the Bram Stoker's Dracula comics adaptation. Would there have ever been a Hellboy if Mignola hadn't done this comic first? Don't forget you can help to unlock classic early episodes of Deconstructing Comics, help me return all the old episodes to this podcast feed, get videos of my brother Paul and me discussing 20th century TV trivia, and at the $4 level get access to hours of additional full-length podcasts. At the $10 level, you can review the book of your choice with me here on this show. Support Deconstructing Comics and our other shows at patreon.com/deconcomics. Or you can send a one-time donation via PayPal to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
Sawate. My name is Stella, and I am the host of Backrow to Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast. Backrow to Oracle is a podcast dedicated to Barbara Gordon, the first woman to hold the mantle of Batgirl for an extended period of time, roughly 1967 to 1988. The goal of Backrow to Oracle is to examine the character's history from her first appearance as Batgirl and continuing through her tenure as Oracle. Each episode looks at a vintage issue of Detective Comics or Batman, as well as other books like Justice League and Freedom Fighters, and modern issues of Batgirl and Birds of Prey. I also keep track of news involving Batgirl and other members of the Bat family, and I have a revolving series of segments like Babs in the Tube, which highlights appearances of Babs in TV and film, Shipper Spotlight, which looks at a variety of comic and pop culture couples, gives their history, and determines whether they are hot or not, Reading with Stella, which could be described as an audio drama, or just me reading a book that relates to Babs or doesn't, and of course, the mainstay literature recommendation. I have been blessed to interview writers Scott Beatty and Chuck Dixon on their Batgirl Year 1 work, Brian Q. Miller on his Batgirl run, Dwayne Swarzinski and Christy Marks on their separate Birds of Prey work, and the creators and actors of the Batgirl Spoiled, the web series. I hope to interview more creators and actors in the future. My goal, most importantly, is to make a fun, entertaining, and thoughtful show that people enjoy and from which they learn. Find the show online at thebatmanuniverse.net and iTunes, and follow the show on Facebook and Twitter at Batgirl to Oracle. Thank you, and fly on, Babs lovers.
Well, what I was going to say is, I think if we're talking about an adaptation that successfully navigates the concept of faithfulness versus innovation, Dracula would be... Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola would be one of those films, I think.
Okay.
I think that's part of the reason why we haven't had another Dracula imitation in 30 years. Another Dracula film in 30 years since it came out, because it so successfully straddles that great adaptation with brilliant innovation to the new medium.
Yeah.
So, Dracula... Oh, you were going to... I'll let you finish whatever you were going to...
Okay, I don't remember exactly. We were talking about scenes that were cut and scenes that were added. Hang on. So
that's fine. Sorry, I
interrupted
you trying to...
When they cut... Now, I forgot that they cut the scene with the shut-out mapes. Is something that nobody's going to understand as we say it out loud in this room. They cut the Hunter-Seeker scene, which is a really exciting, thrilling scene in the book and has been in most of the adaptations. I noticed it, but some things were in there, like the line about concubines at the end is in there, which was, I think, not in the Lynch version. Not in the theatrical cut, right? So I feel like they had access to some stuff, right?
The oral history confirms that they had access to scripts that were changing.
Right.
I think they worked on it for about a year, I think.
Right.
And they went for a meeting with presumably producers or bigwigs associated with the picture, and they were reading their comic adaptation, going, "What's all this? What's all this?" I said, "Well, it's. What do you mean? What's all this? It's what's in the script."
Yeah.
And they said, "Hang on, what script do you have?"
Right.
And they said, "This one." And they said, "Oh my God, that one's been out of date for 10 months."
Right.
But also, and then they dragged out a script, but it wasn't even the final script. They had another script that was covered in hand notation, and the whoever it was, the author Ralph Macchio or someone else, just said, "Oh my goodness, these people do not know what they're doing.
Yeah.
they're filming and they're still rewriting the script.
Yeah. Okay, so, but what occurred to me is that in Dune, it breaks my heart to say it, but you could probably cut any scene. In an adaptation, you might end up with a movie that doesn't make any sense.
I'm proud of you, Kumar, for saying that.
No, I mean, I don't mean that I would cut any scene. I mean that you could cut any scene from it. I almost thought they were going to cut the scene where Paul learns to ride a sandworm in this, because somehow I thought they'd done it out of order or something.
It is in an odd order. It's a different order from the film. Yeah, definitely.
But it occurred to me that really a filmmaker could just say, I'm going to cut this scene or that scene, and you end up with a movie that audiences scratching their heads, but the film would exist in a form, if you know what I mean. And that was kind of my takeaway from the cutting of the Hunter-Seeker scene in this, was really like, oh, so this could be... Well, if you don't have mates... We've seen another thing that's happened because of this 2-month delay we've got between release dates is that I've been seeing all these stills from
information about what's in and what's
scenes
not.
that have been cut. Like we've got stills that were filmed and cut, and Villeneuve says he's not doing a director's cut, etc. Blah blah. So who knows?
Spice Diver, if you're listening,
yes,
get on it, man.
Yeah. So,
look, Kumar, I don't know. I mean, you like this comic adaptation.
I do. I really dig it.
So when we go and see the film, in a few weeks, just keep this comic adaptation in mind with its excisions and omissions. Whenever something comes up on that.
Well, you know what? Legendary, the studio, is putting out a comic of the new Dune adaptation, the new Dune movie.
Really?
Yes, and they're running it on Kickstarter for some stupid reason, because that's how Legendary does comics. I don't know what the deal is, because they're not a comics publisher. I guess they don't know how to do otherwise.
Right.
Did I invest in this? No, I did not, and I'll tell you why. Because I couldn't figure out if the cut scenes were going to be in it or not. And I wanted to contact them and ask, are you going to include scenes that were cut from the movie? But through Kickstarter, you can't contact the Kickstarter, the person who runs the campaign, unless you've pledged to it.
Right, I see.
So I have no way of knowing if this adaptation is going to... But I've seen stills from it, and it just looks like it looks like boring...
So you found yourselves on the horns of the dilemma again. So, it's in the one hand, you want material that was you want the comic adaptation of the film to be different from the film.
Yes. Yes.
Because it will include content that was cut from the film that you think should be in it.
Yeah.
Because that would be a more faithful adaptation of the novel.
Correct. 100% correct. So I don't have many notes here. I'm just gonna. Oh, so I love that. So things like the shields, the personal shields, the special effects, everything.
They're
as
pretty
you said,
mediocre in the film, but
their special effects are really good in the comic, and they're awful to look at in the movie. Yeah. Another interesting thing was the very first. It's not consistent, but the first time you see the worm in this, it's a very abstract, monstrous jaw with teeth in it.
Yeah,
and
it looks like a vortex,
three opening mouth. So in the movie, the worm's mouth opens with this kind of in 3 sections, 3 segments. Now that was designed by John Schonher. I think that's how you pronounce his name. The guy who first illustrated Dune in the 60s.
Okay.
And they did not get Schonher's permission to do that in the 84 movie.
Oh.
And he was not happy about it.
Ah, right.
So I was like, oh, great. So I actually think it's more respectful for Sienkiewicz to come up with his own worm design than to...
It looks more like the one in the Villeneuve film.
Yeah, it really does, yeah.
It really does look good. As you say, it's abstract. It looks... It's not detailed. It looks more abstract, like a hint, like a suggestion of a monstrous hole in the sand.
Yeah.
With teeth. It looks fantastic.
I think later on he does draw the 3-part mouth, but I do love that he kind of avoided it in that one section.
And they look good here. In the film, the more you see the worms, the worse they get. And so at the end, they just look like...
Yeah, and the sand writing looks... it's done on a really bad rear projection or blue screen at the time it would have been, and it looks really bad. Oh, yeah. And, yeah. So everything about this works better than the movie. Last note I want to... so everything's explained better. Mm-hmm. And, what else? Oh, yeah, there's no homophobia in the comic book.
Yeah.
Which is really great.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's none of the Baron's leering or...
Yes, the problematic Baron, the Baron's problematic homosexuality. It's a matter of record that Frank Herbert was a homophobe.
Yeah, he was behind the times, for sure, and it's one of the major flaws of the book, and
But
Samuel R.
the Baron's
Delany...
villainy is associated with his homosexuality.
Yeah. So the Baron is the only homosexual character in the book.
Yes.
And he is the representation of pure evil. I mean, he already wants to oppress an entire planet of people. What more do we really need to add any more to this? And also it has that 1960s association of homosexuality with pedophilia. That's tied into it too, because he's always going after young boys. Even Paul seems to be...
Oh, he has lusts for Paul, doesn't he?
Paul. Yeah. So all that kind of nasty stuff is not in here, and Frank Herbert, I mean, you can see he gave a talk at, I think, Berkeley, early 80s, and this member of the audience, homosexual man, confronted him about it.
Right.
And Samuel R. Delany had confronted him about it in the 70s and said that the book is flawed because the only homosexual character is pure evil or whatever. But this guy in the audience said the same thing, and his defense was really pathetic. Herbert's defense. It's really cringy to listen to now. And he tried to double down in the later books, and he just was putting his foot in his mouth every time. I think in God, Emperor of Dune, there's this whole thing about the fish speakers being homosexuals, and then it's like, for men, it's a phase they go through when they're young, and it's a choice, or all the stuff that, just...
He'd be cancelled, is what we're saying these days.
If he had a Twitter account, he would be done. Donezo.
There's one more thing I want to while I'm looking at your copy that's open there, I noticed the colours are a bit more vivid in your one than they were in my one, the 3-issue.
Yeah, this is... So there's the 3-issue version, then there's the magazine version, which came out under the Marvel Super Special line.
I think this one came out first.
Okay.
And the 3-issue
This is on much better paper than the newsprint, and that would affect the colors.
I had that written down as a critique, and I can see now that that's because of the paper. It looks a bit washed out in the version I have.
Yes.
One other thing is, I just wish it was longer.
Yes. Oh, and also the so which version should you get? Well, the 3-issue version has the 3 covers.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
And rehashing, or rather...
Yes, has recap pages at the start of each issue, which are not in the magazine version. The magazine version is good because it's got the larger pages, and you don't have to look at ads for bubblegum every third page or whatever.
For Reese's Pieces. Or ads for Reese's Pieces every 3 pages. It's really doing my head in.
Yeah, there's the digest, which is fun to carry around. I like any comic and digest size.
That's looking like a paperback. Yeah,
it looks like a paperback size, and it kind of feels more like a Dune novel, which I like about it.
That's pretty cool. I wish I'd got that one instead of the Reese's Pieces one.
Well, again, this is missing the covers, those really awesome cover collages that Sienkiewicz did. Okay, my seg to Dracula was... It doesn't work. It only works if we did Dracula first.
Right. Okay.
Which is,
this podcast is a mess.
Here's the. I've had only 3 sips of beer. By coincidence, so when you suggested we talk about Dune, I said there's not enough to talk about. There's not enough material for.
So much for that.
There's not enough material for a 45-minute podcast. You said, why don't we do the Mignola Dracula? So
it seemed appealing to me, because you have 2
as well,
2 comic book adaptations of 2 big budget film adaptations of 2 classic works of literature.
Yes.
And I guess you could say they're contemporaneous. They came about 8 years apart, I guess.
Yeah. So so you suggested that, and because we had seen it in the comic shop a few months ago before lockdown, we'd seen it on the shelf, and I said, I own that. I'll lend it to you. It's an awesome comic. And by coincidence, a few weeks ago, I think it was a few weeks before you even suggested it, I put the soundtrack CD in my car, and I've been listening to that as I drive around. And it's by, I even wrote down the person's name. It's Wojciech
Polish,
Kilar.
I think. Right.
Yeah, Wojciech Kilar. I don't know how to pronounce it.
It's an amazing soundtrack.
For me, it's Bram Stoker's Dracula, Akira, and Basil Polidorus' soundtrack of Conan the Barbarian. Those are the big 3 for me. But as I was reading this comic book adaptation, which we'll get to, my thought was they didn't have the music in the comic, which is unfortunate. And then I was thinking about Dune, which I'd read 2 days earlier, and thinking they didn't have the music in the comic, which is fortunate. Because we didn't have to listen to that dumbass Toto music while reading this Dune comic, which is another great thing about it. It's certainly one minus in the Mignola comic. Okay, so we got to talk.
Doesn't have that.
Let's talk about Dracula for an hour.
Okay, fantastic. Settle in, people.
I got a long story. You want to hear about my VCR stories? I've got longer stories about Dracula. Okay, so Mike Mignola was the guy that drew really odd. He had an oddball style, and he drew superhero comics. But whenever you saw his stuff, you thought it was really cool because it didn't look like other superhero comics out there. So he had done this thing, especially he had a series for DC about the new gods and Fourth World called Cosmic Odyssey, which had really cool art. And he had done this kind of Batman story set in Jack the Ripper times, which was called Gotham by Gaslight, which was really...
That sounds awesome.
It was very cool, and it had a very kind of... He was kind of coming into his style, and he had done... I'm trying to remember, he'd done Fawford and Grey Mouser, and he'd done the first Rocket Raccoon series for Marvel. So...
He actually has done Fawford and Grey Mouser?
Yeah,
I know that he did cover for it.
No, he did the interiors for that, for the comic book version, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm finding out things that I didn't know about.
Yeah, so he was kind of this guy, but when he'd do Gotham by Gaslight, that was like, whoa, this is really cool, because he's doing all these shadows, and like Gotham, Batman was really...
He does shadows better than anyone.
Well, at this stage, he was coming into his shadows, right? Because at that time, it was like, leave lots of white spaces for the colorists to go in there, or it was all superhero comics or whatever. But he had that really oddball art style. And then I heard that he was doing a Dracula comic, and I was like... This is the perfect thing for this guy. Nobody could do a Dracula comic better than this guy. And I don't remember if I saw some panels and advertisements or what, but I was like, I'm going to buy this comic. And I bought it. It was around 1992. They were in single issues from Topps. They came poly-bagged with trading cards.
Right. You mentioned the trading cards.
And some of the trading cards were like images he had drawn, and some were stills from the movie. And I loved this comic. I became completely obsessed with it, and then I thought, I can't wait for this movie to come out, because back then it was like, it would come out a little bit before the movie or whatever. The movie came out, and I became obsessed with it, and it became my favorite movie for a very long time. Now,
is anyone detecting a pattern here?
Yeah, looking back, I've become obsessive about things. I will say up until my early 20s, I certainly became very fixated on things. And I loved it, and so I had only seen Sid and Nancy before this that Gary Oldman had been in.
Oh, I see.
But I had a friend, Dana, who's been on this show many times. Dana really knew Gary Oldman well, and he kind of educated me about him, and I became so obsessed with Gary Oldman. I used to have little mini film festivals in my house where I'd have friends over, and we would watch like 6 Gary Oldman movies in a row, and I would make up these little movie programs on my Mac and print them out and hand them out to everybody. And
wow.
So I became crazy for him. I had a huge screen crush on Winona Ryder, and that started with Dracula. I don't know if I would have seen The Godfather as a kid, but I don't think I saw it again, or certainly hadn't watched Apocalypse Now or The Conversation or any of those 70s giants that he had made. I mean, I just they were on the periphery.
Sure.
You were mentioning the cast before. I actually think, there's Richard E. Grant, there's Cary Elwes, there's Tom Waits.
Tom Waits, I forgot about that, yeah. He plays Renfield.
Yeah, I actually think the cast is pretty awesome. Winona's in it, and Anthony Hopkins is in it.
I think Gary Oldman and Anthony Hopkins just dominate the film. They're totally fantastic actors. Yes. And, what everyone talks about with this film is that Keanu Reeves' performance as Jonathan Harker.
Well, this goes right back to our discussion of Dune, because he doesn't perform and he doesn't speak in the comic.
Right, yeah, of course, so he's fine in the comic.
You're looking at drawings of him, and you're looking at speech balloons.
Yes.
There's no goofball attempt at a British accent.
Oh my goodness, yeah. It's no dull surprise when Dracula waves the sword at him.
No, there's there's no awkwardness like that.
Oh, you're right. And speaking of the adaptation being strong in the areas where the film is weak, Keanu Reeves' performance, this is hardly an original thing to say about Coppola's Dracula film, is probably the weakest thing about it, and in the comic, it's not a factor.
Yeah.
It's not a factor.
No, it's not. It
He's
doesn't
just using his handsome likeness.
Yeah, yeah, and actually the likenesses are really good, except for Winona. I think sometimes Mignola struggles with her face for some reason. I feel like maybe they didn't give him... Again, he was working on the movie, so I don't know how much he had or what, but sometimes her face looks more off the... Or maybe it's just the way his style, his that droopy kind of style of his, or what, I don't know how exactly to describe it, but...
It might just be a stylistic thing.
Yeah, but this was definitely. I mean, this was what you know what he did after Dracula.
Everybody knows what he
Hellboy.
did after Dracula. Yeah.
This was the door. This was the gateway. This was the thing that had to happen
in order for Hellboy to be possible.
For Hellboy, for him to be able to. Well, I mean, I'm speaking out of my ass, but for him to be in a creative space. To be able to do the thing that he most in his heart wanted to do, more than the superhero stuff, the Hellboy.
Yeah.
I feel like this was the stone he needed to step on to get through that.
Well, we can see thematic or conceptual links between Dracula and Hellboy. I mean, on the one hand, if his previous work is with superheroes, and then you make a comic about a supernatural figure trying to exist in the modern world, with negotiating love and things like that. There are far more links between Dracula and Hellboy than there are between Batman and Hellboy, I think, in that respect.
Yeah.
So if you had to position it in a literary lineage, you can see that this Dracula comic is a clear antecedent to Hellboy.
Although he kind of badmouthed this movie at San Diego Comic-Con in '97 when I saw him there.
Did you really?
Well, he said the thing he said was, and this would be a good seg into a conversation about the adaptation of the movie's version of that book. He said the thing he didn't like about the movie was that they gave Dracula a backstory, whereas in the novel he's just this evil force. He's just pure evil for no reason, and that by modern screenwriting standards does not fly anymore.
100%. But if you excise his backstory, then you can't have the love story.
Exactly.
So,
but it's not a love story in the novel.
No, it's not. And that's where, I mean, this is what elevates it as an adaptation, among other things. Like, adding the love story doesn't detract from the film. It adds to it. It makes Dracula an interesting, sympathetic character.
Yeah. It is a version of Dracula.
Yes.
And it's interesting that it was called Bram Stoker's Dracula, because at the time... But
in some other ways, Kumar, it's a more faithful adaptation than ones that came before, because it includes some of these characters.
Yeah.
So Richard E. Grant's character, Carrie Ewell's character, they were usually combined. They were usually
sometimes Mina and Lucy were combined, especially in Hammer. Often they would combine those characters.
Yeah, we've got Lord Godalming and and Dr. Seward, all of these characters which we know from the great Fury of Dracula board game. Yeah. Which are not commonly in film adaptations it's rare to see all three of them.
So this movie, when it came out, was purported to be a more faithful adaptation, which is why they called it Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Got it.
However, I also heard a story that another movie studio, had the rights to making movies called Dracula.
Oh.
So they had to have a name that was not Dracula. You have to make a movie called Dracula 2000 or Bram Stoker's Dracula
or Nosferatu.
Yes, exactly. You have to have some sort of workaround because maybe Paramount Universal probably owns Dracula.
Right, of course.
That's my guess anyway. So I don't know. I heard these two different versions, but again, it's okay. So let's speaking of Mina and Lucy, and Renfield. So let's start with Renfield. What do we know about Renfield? This is a question. So Renfield, Dracula's a really interesting case because all the movies blend together. I've read the book twice, and yet sometimes still stuff comes from the movies, and I can't remember if it was in the book or the movie version. For Renfield is a prime example, and Lucy is another one. We'll talk about her. But Renfield, for example, he was the solicitor that went to Transylvania before Jonathan Harker and came back and went insane because he'd been dealing with Dracula.
Yeah.
That's not in the book. That's in every movie version. So all the movie versions, there was a stage play, and most of the movies, including the Bela Lugosi one, were based on the play. And almost every version, even the one with, who is that? I can't believe I'm brain farting on this. He was a really handsome actor in this. This is a late 70s version. He was the guy that played Skeletor in Masters of the Universe.
Oh my goodness.
Frank Langella.
Okay.
The Frank Langella Dracula also was based on a play that he had been, a stage production he had acted in as well, I believe. So, all the stuff we know about Renfield, because in the book I don't think there's any explanation for why Dracula has chosen Renfield to be his minion or whatever. It's very random.
I can't remember. It's been a while since I read the book, actually.
And Lucy is every version, almost every version is very sexualized, especially in the Coppola version. Way sexualized. And I don't think she's not like that in the book at all. She's just another Victorian lady.
Yes,
this has been slowly creeping up, over decades, this portrayal of Lucy. So
as a loose woman.
Yeah. It's very any time you're dealing with Dracula, it's really a real mind melting. I don't know what version this came from or whatever. So I think that again, I've probably watched, because I was so obsessed with that movie, I've probably watched it about 20 times.
Right.
One time after it had played, they used to play movies at the university, and it was like $2, so I went and saw it twice in one night.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was so into it, and now looking back, I actually think it's not. I don't know how I feel about it now. I'm not going to watch it 20 more times.
Right. I think I watched it not long after it came out, and as a teenager presumably, and I didn't get it.
Right.
I think I lost interest after about 20 minutes to half an hour or something like that.
I think there's some stuff, the whole absinthe drinking scene is bizarre. And it took me about 10 viewings to figure out what was happening or even stop to think what they were talking about. I didn't even wasn't really paying attention. I was like, what's going on? At what stage in the narrative is this happening? All that kind of stuff.
Oh, anyway, I watched it again last summer, I think. So it was the first time I'd watched it since trying to watch it in the 90s.
Okay.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it so much. It was fantastic. The imagery.
Yeah, it's really over the top.
So fantastic.
I think
it's so over the top is the word for it. It's like opera.
Yes.
The crashing score, Gary Oldman's performance, he's chewing the scenery.
Yeah. And they did all the effects in camera.
Yes, that's right. That's
there's definitely
so it looks great still.
A feeling of there's the scene where Lucy has been turned and she's coming down the stairs into the tomb. You can see her dress is fluttering in this weird way because they actually filmed her going backwards up the stairs and they reversed it. So there's a few things like that were really great in it, and
lots of miniatures, lots of really great looking miniatures, lots of magic lantern style effects. The eyes appear in the background. It's just and of course, and so that means it holds up really well, unlike Dune 1984.
Yeah, it does hold. You're right, it does hold up because the effects were all done in camera. Yeah, but I think Mignola's approach to...
Oh, we were talking about comics, weren't we?
Well, yes, but I mean, this leads right into it, so it looks really good as a comic book, again, because of the colors, and I don't remember the name of this costume designer, but I think they won a Best Costume Design
Japanese.
Oscar.
It was a Japanese woman who had never seen Dracula and didn't know anything about it.
Okay.
And which is why he's wearing these fantastic... robes and things. Like, what do we think of? What's the Hammer Dracula? He's got a black cloak and a widow's peak. But there's Dracula who's wearing these fabulous... Like, when he's sleeping in his coffin, it's this amazing Technicolor robe.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and the hair, he had this weird double... of his forms...
The famous butt hair,
The famous butt head was really weird. I just loved all that stuff. And it actually, I think it kind of... It looks great in the comic.
Yes.
And it
looks wonderful in the comic.
You're never like, what is that butthead thing in the comic? It's just kind of, it's just all part of the same landscape.
Looks opulent and strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, the comic, it's fantastic. A lot of the dreamlike magic lantern style imagery, eyes being superimposed on a landscape, all that stuff is really perfectly suited to like a comic book frame.
Yeah.
And to Mignola's art style with his block colors and shadows, and it looks really great. It's a fantastic adaptation of the visuals.
Yeah.
And I just love his style. I've read other Hellboy. My exposure to Mignola was Hellboy. I just love the art style. We bought the board game. I believe it was. I got it for your birthday maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Just because the wonderful art.
Yeah, it's full of the art. Yeah.
He did all the art for it. It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's brilliantly suited to.
Yeah, something else we should mention, which we haven't, I can't believe we haven't said it yet, was this is written by Roy Thomas.
Ah, right.
So Roy Thomas probably wrote, I'm going to say, about 10,000 Dracula comics for Marvel.
Oh, really?
In the 70s and 80s. Tomb of Dracula.
Kumar realized after this was recorded that he was confused. Roy Thomas did plot the first issue of Tomb of Dracula, but it was Marv Wolfman who wrote all but the first 6 issues of the 70-issue run of the series.
And that is an awesome comic book as well. It's really one of the better 70s Marvel comics when they were kind of out in the weeds. I don't know what they were doing. Some Conan over here and some Tomb of Dracula over here. And that was a really great comic too. And he was, I guess, I don't know why Topps was doing these. They were doing X-Files and Xena comics as well. So I guess their game was licensed comics. But they somehow knew to tap Roy Thomas, and the dialogue is quite interesting because reading this, because I've seen the movie so many times, I actually know every line of dialogue. Well, I can't recite it, but if a word is different or a sentence is different, I know that it's different because I remember that it's not the line that was in the movie. And he's actually clarified a lot of things, and they put in narrative captions like when Harker is running around the castle. There's a line in the captions about I picked the lock and got out of my room. And then he talks about how he finds this chamber, and he's like, "Oh, I bet the Count's pleasured many women in here." These lines are not in the movie, and you don't know how he got out of his room or why is he wandering around. And there's some like explanatory stuff in there.
Yeah.
And he's even I think Roy Thomas was writing those Dracula comics for so many years that he kind of knew the dialogue better. Like he knew how to write speech for those people in a better way than I think the guy's name was
the screenplay.
I think his last name was Hart, H-A-R-T. I don't remember his name, but anyway.
He could almost do it on autopilot, right? Because he'd written so many.
Yeah.
Not to play it down, but he knew it intuitively. How to write a cool Dracula comic.
Yeah. So he kind of massaged it in here and there to certain things make more sense. There were things I didn't really think about watching, even though I've seen that movie so many times. I never thought about why exactly is he running around the castle when he should be scared and he's seen all this stuff happen, etc.
Well, he feels compelled to, doesn't he?
Yeah, or something like that.
Well, something along those lines. And he picks the lock, as you say.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing I loved about the Mignola was, again, like Sienkiewicz, he had when there were montages, he had some freedom to really explore the page, and particularly the scene where Dracula in wolf form is attacking Lucy at the same time that Mina and Jonathan are getting married. And we get a couple of panels, they're like alternating panels of the wedding and the wolf attack in really radically different colors. I think one's like bright yellow and one's like kind of dark bluish. And looks really very, very, very cool. Very well done. There's also when the wolf comes off of the ship and attacks London for the first time. There's a really great kind of montage where he just goes crazy with a page and designs it in a way that it has really great flow of the eye happening down there. And he's handled those things very well. I think there's very few, like the Gom Jabbar scene. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 moments. Oh yeah, there was a scene where Harker accidentally cuts himself in the mirror, or when he's shaving. Yeah. Dracula comes into the room, and Dracula sees the mirror is there, and Dracula's not reflected in it, and he shatters the mirror. Yes. And it's very hard to pull this off in a comic book.
Right. I remember in the film, the mirror shatters.
The mirror shatters, yeah.
It just shatters. Yeah. And presumably Dracula's done it with his eldritch power.
Right.
What happens in the comic?
Well, you get a panel of Keanu. He's looking at Dracula, back over his shoulder at Dracula. So she's shaving. He's shaving in a mirror. The mirror is kind of blue. That's how it's designated as a mirror. His face is blurry in it.
Okay.
You get the next panel or two. Dracula's coming to the room and he sees him shaving. Then the next panel is just a panel of the mirror with Keanu's face, and then the next panel the mirror shatters. Right. So
I think it might even look as though Dracula struck the mirror.
Yeah, well, he might have.
Because he doesn't strike the mirror in the film.
He might have, but it's not clear that you're looking at a mirror in the panel. It's just a mirror. Just looks
like a fractured...
You can't tell it. You don't register that this is a mirror with Keanu's face, but not Dracula's face.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah, I do. I remember having to reread that page, actually, because I wasn't sure about the sequence of events.
And there's a very weird sequence where he explores the castle and he finds these bottles down in some room, and he opens one, and these drops go up to the ceiling, like they float up, and he's like, Keanu's just like, whoa, dude. And that's kind of his only reaction to the whole scene.
Yeah.
In the comic, it's very hard to depict the direction something is going in a comic without speed lines or something. It kind of, you've got these droplets frozen in air, and it's not really clear if they're going up or down, or why we should
collecting.
Why should we care about
condensation from the ceiling?
Right. Yeah. Why should we care about this moment unless you've seen the movie and you know?
Sure. But to go back to the shaving scene.
Yeah.
Oh, the bright red blood on the blade, and then he licks. Yeah. Of course, famously, he licks the blood off the cutthroat razor. It looks fantastic in the comic. It looks amazing.
Yeah.
I remember in the film, it looks just kind of like really creepy, but it looks so good. Which is why I found it odd that there's a black and white version of this comic out there.
Right. So yeah. We read the Topps trade paperback edition, which is very hard to find.
Okay.
So they did the 4 issues or whatever it was. Then they came out with a trade, and then IDW just about 2 or 3 years ago came out with 2. They came out with a hardcover in black and white, and then a trade paperback in color.
Okay.
You can appreciate the line work more if it's not in color, but looking at the colors, rereading it today,
the colors are fantastic.
Yeah, they're part of it, and there's so much shadow that it plays off of the color.
Almost maybe too much shadow sometimes. Some people are in shadow a lot. And the thing is, though, if you didn't have the color, I think I would notice it even more, that they're like, sometimes people, you can only see their mouths. you know?
I think that's Mignola's style.
It's 100% his style, but I was just saying, reading it, I was thinking, these guys are in shadow a lot.
You know what? So something we talk about on this show a lot is artists who cheat on backgrounds or don't cheat on backgrounds. And Mignola has found an excuse, which is that they're always in castles with no lighting. And it's a great excuse. Just draw 3 bricks and half of the character's face. This is perfect.
Yeah.
I think the IDW edition, one of them at least, has some of his pencil pages at the back. So I'd be curious to see that.
Yes, I read a review of somewhere of the black and white version.
Yeah.
I remember reading it and it's talking about the black and white art, and I thought, that's odd, because the version I read wasn't...
Well, we had the Topps version. Back in those days, they wouldn't have published anything in black and white. There was no sense of, let's artistically appreciate the line work in this.
In comics.
No, but I love the Topps version. It's still my favorite version. I was not tempted to buy the IDW version, despite whatever extras are in it, because it's got this red foil stamping on the cover that's really cool. Like the raised red foil for the logo, which I thought was really awesome. It's a really beautifully put together edition. I've only seen, we saw that edition in the shops, but it just didn't look as over the top. The new edition, the IDW version.
Okay.
But I think it's going to be impossible to find the Topps one. I bought that one 7 years ago. I know because of that Facebook post I did. But I think it must have come out right after. It must have been 93 or something like that they actually put it out. Yeah.
So, Kumar, can you recommend Marvel Comics' Dune adaptation from 1984 and the Topps Dracula adaptation from 1992?
Okay, so I think Dune I think it's a great comic. I think it's hard to find in any edition, any of the 3 formats. I still think it's more fun if you like Dune. in some form. I think you will get more out of it. But I will say, Villeneuve, I saw an interview with him just a month ago where he said the act of adaptation is an act of vandalism.
Oh, did he?
And Jodorowsky said that he was raping the book.
He did.
And
he said a lot of things.
David Lynch disowned his version of the movie.
That's true.
I actually think this is the best, maybe the best adaptation of Dune. If you don't want to read the book, if you're on a desert island and this is the only thing that washes up on shore, this is the one. This is the one to read. I think it's pretty cool.
I agree. I think I think it's very good. It's good if you're a fan of the book, if you've seen the film and are wondering what could have been.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's better than... Yeah, again, because of the special effects and stuff, it's better than watching the movie in that respect. Yeah, for sure. I think it's a really cool comic.
Yes.
Mignola, the Dracula, Bram Stoker, very easy to get, I think. I hope. It only came out 2 or 3 years ago. Should still be relatively easy to get.
It was in the comic shop when we went there a couple of months ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was. So it's maybe still in print, but it's... And I mean, he's not drawing anymore, really. He doesn't draw Hellboy. It's all hired hands.
He hasn't done it for years, has he?
No, and
does the covers.
This is really, it's just as good as it was reading it in 1992.
If you like Mignola and you like his art,
well, yeah, and
you want to see him draw Dracula,
yeah, and as a version of Dracula, there's stuff in here that wasn't in the movie. Like there's a scene where Jonathan sees Dracula in the street. And he runs out, he chases after him, and Dracula comes up to the carriage and has a conversation with Mina. That's not in the movie. In the movie, he sees Dracula, and they hold him back. They're like, calm down, and then they cut.
It's much better in the comic version, I think.
Yeah, so, as a version, it's really interesting that they're both like classic literature that have gone through multiple movie versions, and then we're dealing with comics of movie versions. I think this is... It's an awesome comic. It really is.
These comics, I suppose they really showcase the strengths of the comics medium.
Yep.
Right? As a way of showing something, especially with the Dune film, which didn't come through well in a visual, in the film medium. It showed the way that comics are how would you put it? A valid art form and a way of representing stories and works.
Yeah.
Because these comics are strong, especially the Dune one, in areas where the films were perhaps a little bit weaker. And, this comics are art.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think even, I think the Roy Thomas writing in the comic is better than the dialogue that was in
the Dracula film, right?
Because
he was polished. He'd honed his Dracula style, but from what you're saying, he was a polished writer of transitioning gothic horror to the comics, medium.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this this glimpse into Kumar's psyche.
Yeah. Now the question is, has this gotten something off our chests at all? Is it going to
carry us through?
Or is it going to make it worse? Are we going to actually be talking about this podcast and stuff we forgot to say for the next 4 weeks
until we get
when we see the movie? Is it going to? I actually feel like. So I wouldn't be at this stage of mania if the movie wasn't coming out, because the movie is a reason I reread the books and then read the Cliff Notes and am looking at all these stills and stuff, and I don't think I would be going. And of course, there's more chatter. There's more chatter in the Facebook groups because of the movie, and
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about Dune a lot more because of that stuff after the movie comes out. Because let's talk about Alan Moore again. When the Watchmen movie was about to come out, we've had this conversation, I started to go insane because I started seeing billboards of Watchmen on the sides of buses.
Yes.
I was like, what universe am I living in? I was having dreams about going to see the Watchmen movie at night. Yeah. I never saw that movie.
You never saw it?
Somehow I rode over the wave, and once the billboards and stuff were gone and people stopped talking about it, I the desire left, and
Right.
I had no interest in seeing it. And I heard all the bad reviews, and I was like, okay, I'm fine.
I think what you're saying, Kumar, is that you're particularly sensitive to the collective unconscious,
yes.
especially when it pertains to something that
Well,
you
it's
like.
not even unconscious. It's the problem is it's conscious. It's out there. It's on billboards and
It's
buses.
superliminal, like that Simpsons joke. It's being yelled at you from the corner of every
Yes.
bus stop and on every building and in every YouTube
Yeah.
trailer.
Yeah. So I'm wondering how I'm gonna feel after we see it twice.
That's it. Hopefully
in a
it'll
matter of 4
puncture
days.
this. Hopefully it'll lance that boil, Kumar.
Yeah,
Because
and
imagine
then-
if it just keeps ramping up, we'll go slowly mad.
Yeah. So I think I have a feeling it will slow down and our wives will be relieved for a while. And then I think we'll start
the next
hearing
thing.
production notes about part 2, which has been approved or
That's
announced.
true. That's true.
They've given it the green light. So then we might start having these chats again about, are they finally going to put this thing in or that character, or are they going to cut this scene, or how are they going to get around this, blah, blah, blah.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Well, stay tuned for our next podcast, live from the Mental Institute.
Okay. I think, yeah, we better stop there. I really,
Cut that last bit, Tim.
no,
It's insensitive to people with mental illness.
That's true. Am I going insane? I don't know.
After this podcast, I feel like there's a case for it.
I'm starting to think now, wait a second, am I going to be thinking about this podcast for the next week?
It's not. I don't know if he's going to put this one up, because it's just kind of.
Well,
like
we
cheap.
did talk more about the comics, and I really thought I was going to talk about my VCR for a very long time.
We didn't do too bad. I tried to drag you back on course a few times.
My Gary Oldman film festivals and stuff. But
I can't believe that. That's amazing.
really,
I can't believe
somehow we talked about the comics a lot. Great comics.
They are really good.
Okay, let's leave it at that.
Marvel's 1984 Dune comic is currently tough to find outside of auction sites. Bram Stoker's Dracula is currently being published in a recolored version by IDW. You can help Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and all our podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Next week, Kumar and I discuss some 1950s superhero wackiness, looking at Batman-Superman team-ups in World's Finest Comics. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.